Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar entitled Emerging Vaping Products, Youth Allure and the Lack of Comprehensive Regulation. My name is Kira Hill. I'm a staff attorney at the Public Health Law Center, and I'll be moderating the webinar today. As Stephanie said, we'll have a Q&A at the end, but please feel free to drop questions in the chat as they come up throughout the presentations. Next slide, please. So we have Christina Curell, who's education manager at Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes, or PAVE. Patty Zettler, who's associate professor at the Moritz College of Law, and Natalie Hemmerich, who's staff attorney at the Public Health Law Center. As I mentioned, Natalie and I are both staff attorneys at the Public Health Law Center. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, the Public Health Law Center is located at the Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota. We acknowledge that we are in the indigenous homelands of the Dakota people, also known as the Sioux Nation, and that 4 federally recognized Dakota tribal nations remain in the area. The region is also shared territory with the Anishinaabe, also known as the Ojibwe or Chippewa, and the Ho-Chunk Nation also has a historic relationship to the region. We appreciate the ongoing stewardship, spiritual connections, and lifeways developed in these homelands upon which the law school sits. Next slide, please. Our goal at the Public Health Law Center is policy that improves public health. This means taking into account the social determinants of health, adverse childhood experiences, and inequities in general. We consider it our responsibility to use our legal knowledge to bring justice to public health as we support our partners in reducing health disparities. When all people are healthier, the communities they live in are happier, safer, more vibrant places. Next slide. At the Public Health Law Center, we provide partners across the country with legal technical assistance relating to commercial tobacco control, which includes conducting legal research, assisting with policy development, implementation and defense, issuing publications, and conducting trainings like this one. We don't represent individuals, so if you need specific legal advice, please seek out the advice of an attorney licensed in your jurisdiction. We also do not lobby. So with that, let's talk briefly about what we are and aren't here to talk about today. We're going to discuss certain types of emerging vaping products, which include products made or used with tobacco-derived nicotine, tobacco products made or used with what is or is often advertised as non-tobacco derived or synthetic nicotine, and finally, vaping products that don't have any nicotine at all. The first category is the category we're likely most familiar with, and it includes new products that actually have nicotine made from tobacco. We are not talking about those today. Next slide. The second category includes products that a lot of folks are hearing more and more about recently, and that category includes pouch products, some liquids, and then most infamously, puff bar. From a very high level, these products should either be regulated as tobacco products or as drugs and devices by the FDA. That's kind of a complicated area. So we at the Public Health Law Center do plan to have a separate webinar soon on synthetic nicotine products specifically, where we'll discuss these products in much more detail, so stay tuned. What we are here to talk about in depth today is the third category of products, non-nicotine vaping products. So these are products that don't contain nicotine and are intended to vape other non-nicotine substances. They live within a complicated regulatory reality, which Patty is going to delve into in much more detail shortly. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Christina to talk about what these products are, how they're marketed, and why we have concerns about them from a public health standpoint. So thanks, Christina. I'll stop.
Thank you. Let me bring up my screen. Okay, so just to recap what I'm going to cover, I'll tell you a little bit about PAVE, Parents Against Vaping, and we're going to go through these non-nicotine e-cigarette devices, the health and wellness and cessation claims they make, confusing and misleading instructions and information on their websites, on their social media, their youth marketing and sales, youth accessibility of these products, and of course the potential health concerns, which is the whole reason that we care. So I'm Christina Curell. I'm an MPH. I'm PAVE's education manager. I'm not a doctor or a lawyer. I'm so glad we have so many lawyers on this call, but being a part of PAVE, we have the privilege of speaking with pediatricians and chemists who are actually doing the research on these products. And so I'm really happy to share what we know and understand about these emerging products with you. PAVE itself is a national advocacy and education nonprofit. We really are powered by a network of volunteers around the country, and we're run by volunteers up to our senior leadership and our co-founders. We're a relatively new, young organization. PAVE's origin story is back in 2018. The co-founders are moms, and their sons were in 9th grade when they had a talk at their high school that was supposedly about mental health and addiction. But what they heard from their sons was that there was some mixed messaging, and that the presenter ended up having a Juul on him and telling them that the Juul was totally safe, that it was about to be approved by the FDA, and he called it the iPhone of e-cigarettes. They were a little bit confused by the mixed message, and after digging in, they found out that this person was also a representative of Juul. And so naturally they were enraged, and they sought to join and support the sort of advocacy organization like Mothers Against Drunk Driving or Moms Demand Action in the youth vaping space, and they didn't find one, so they started it, and that's how we have PAVE. And it's quickly grown to be the national parent voice on this issue, where we do federal level advocacy, state level, local hearings. You'll hear PAVE parent volunteers testifying, sharing their stories. We really represent, the millions of parents and families who are personally affected by this. And our main priority and issue is nicotine e-cigarettes and big tobacco, all flavored tobacco products. But that said, when we found out about these non-nicotine vapes, we became concerned pretty quickly, and you will see why. So these are sometimes referred to as diffusers, personal diffusers, personal aromatherapy, or air inhalers, all of which I think is really misleading. Obviously, an inhaler is a medical device. Diffuser might make you think of like reeds in a cup of essential oil, making your room smell nice, or like the sort of thing that creates, makes the room smell nice. This aerosol that's like over in the corner, not something that's in an e-cigarette that you're inhaling directly into your body, right? So overall, the concerns are about marketing to youth, about youth access, about the health risks that we do understand already about vaping, and then about the unknowns, both due to not knowing all of the ingredients that are in these products because of the lack of regulation, lack of transparency, and just the lack of research even on what is in them. So that can include vitamins, essential oils, caffeines, natural flavors, melatonin, and other substances. So like I said, there are effects, right, of vaping that are not related to nicotine, but would apply here too. So cardiovascular and lung issues, worsening asthma, EBOLI, allergic reactions to ingredients. We know there's toxicity in these flavor chemicals to heart tissue. It impacts your immune system via your lungs, your respiratory tract, the bacteria in your mouth and your oral microbiome. There are risks related to propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin or glycerol, which is in almost all these and other vapes as sort of the filler substance, which we'll talk about it more later. And then we'll touch on how these companies and these products make claims about their ingredients being natural, maybe organic, GRAS certified, which means generally recognized as safe, but does actually not even apply because it's about ingesting, and something being safe to ingest, like eat or drink, does not mean that it's safe to heat up several hundred degrees and inhale deeply into your lungs, right? So I'm just going to buzz through some of these marketing photos, and you can decide for yourself who you think these are targeting. These are from websites of different companies. Let's do more about month later, aromatherapy anywhere. Love, I want to focus on for a second because I think their FAQs are really telling. There's a question in there, is the packaging discreet? Yes, we ship all orders in plain boxes and bags with nondescript return address information, which, I can't say why that's there, but I could venture a guess. So Love, just as an example, comes in disposables and pod-based devices. It's totally compatible with the Juul. If you didn't know any better, you might think those were Juul pods. And then the pictures I showed before were just from their websites, but there's also social media marketing. So on the left there, that's an ad I was actually served on Instagram from Monk. As you can see, these are really youthful. There are influencers who are very young. The woman in the middle is like, doing her meditation or yoga. A lot of these have wellness messaging associated with them. And this is, regulation that for a nicotine e-cigarette, you can't have youth paid marketing. You can't be have youth influencers, but these, because they're not tobacco products, don't have that same regulation. Slide's not advancing. Right, so young influencers. And if you want to dive deeper into this, I recommend looking at any of their websites or social media. You can watch endless influencer videos, and it's pretty clear who they're messaging to. So this is another brand, Cloudy, who specifically does melatonin vapes. Ripple, another brand we'll talk about later today, are available on urbanoutfitters.com, which is obviously a very youth-friendly platform. Say F nicotine loud and proud with your Ripple merch. Inhale Health, these are all from their social media. They make melatonin, B12 vapes, caffeine vapes. They have one called the anti-cigarette, which I think Patty will talk later about. Making health claims is one thing, making cessation claims when you're not a cessation product is another thing. This is more from Inhale Health and all of their influencers. As you see, it's just endless videos of young people trying out their product. Hi, it's me, vitamin B12. Have you inhaled your vitamins today? Inhale the future. So apart from being youthful, there's health related marketing. There are fitness and health influencers using the hashtag fitness. The woman on the left is surrounded by stuffed animals. That's youth rather than health, but questionable marketing. Health Vape claims to be the original vitamin vape. 6 convenient options to increase your focus and energy or help you rest, relax, and rejuvenate. Again, very young looking people. So here are a few different things from different websites. Is Ripple a vape? Hell no. They are, anti-nicotine. That's why they're here. They're doing plant-powered vapes to, help you get healthy. Health Vape has this blog article section, how to inhale the fountain of youth, how to get healthy skin fast. Monk claims that their products have 100% pure therapeutic air. Everything that goes into a Monk is healthy and everything that comes out is healthy. I have questions. Love, optimize your physical and mental potential. Inhale vitamin infused vapor. Spark has this metabolism boosting one called Melt. Health Vape does not contain any nicotine. Their mission is to help people kick harmful nicotine habits with a healthier alternative, a refreshing blend of daily vitamins to support your wellness goals. And then I want to focus for a second on vitamin vape. It's one at the bottom right, a better way to be. So they make claims all over their website. They tote that you should check their FAQs and look at the independent research that is done on the effectiveness of inhaling your B12. More effective than pills. Studies have shown that inhaling B12 can be hundreds of times more effectively absorbed than pills. Read the quoted science journals in our FAQs. So you might go over to their FAQs and look at the questions they have. Is it safe? Is inhalation really that much better than taking pills? And they quote and cite these research articles, which are from 1953 and 1954. And their studies on delivering B12 with an aerosol through a nebulizer, which again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a chemist, but the important thing to note is that, a nebulizer and an e-cigarette are aerosolizing in a very different way, and an e-cigarette depends on heat. So when you heat up these ingredients to really high temperatures, as you do in an e-cigarette, you're changing them chemically, right? They can deactivate the things that are inside the liquid. Some chemicals or substances can turn into something else, or when you're combining multiple things in an e-cigarette and heating them up, they can combine to form a whole new substance. And so one thing that I had the pleasure of speaking with two researchers, chemists, who have published research on propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin and how they can form formaldehyde. Drs. David Payton and Rob Strongen. And Rob Strongen is also doing research specifically on B12 and aerosolization. What I learned from him is that B12 is such a giant molecule, and other vitamins can also be large, and it's just difficult to aerosolize them. And without saying that it's impossible, he, having studied this, has said that it's never been observed that B12 as a liquid, when aerosolized, B12 has not been observed in the aerosol after that process. So there's a big question of whether or not you're even delivering any benefit if we were talking about potential benefits. But I think the bigger issue here is that we're talking about harms of these products, right? So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these companies say that in their FAQs, like all their ingredients are natural or organic, or that they come from, approved labs, and that they're GRAS certified ingredients. And GRAS means generally regarded as safe to ingest, like to eat or drink. So we had a great pediatrician speaking on a webinar yesterday, who gave the example of, vanilla extract is a liquid, it's safe to ingest. That doesn't mean that heating it up 300 degrees and inhaling it into your lungs is safe. So that GRAS does not apply for aerosolization. And when you do that to these substances, you can create nanoparticles, which are so tiny that they can be delivered directly into your bloodstream when they go that deep into your lungs. So if there are toxins or carcinogens, they really can go directly into your bloodstream and circulate throughout your whole body. And when you think about what's in these vapes specifically, we talked about vitamins, the propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin or glycerol, each can form formaldehyde when they're heated up at these high temperatures. And then if you're looking at a vape that has essential oils like monk and ripple do, those contain terpenes, which break down into carcinogens and toxins, like acrolein, isoprene, benzene. Okay, so I want to go over a few other misleading, incorrect, confusing claims that are in communications from these companies. Monk is one that's particularly infuriating, coming from Parents Against Vaping, and with our focus being on kids. Urban Outfitters is obviously a platform that is very youth friendly. The flavor you're looking at is sexy. There's also Zen and Sleep and a whole variety of flavors. But you can buy these on urbanoutfitters.com. You don't have to have age verification. Very accessible. I've been looking at this site for a while, and back in February of 2021, in the instructions, which are like fine print, you have to like look at the product details and expand it and read how to use. Press your lips to the end opposite of the jewel, breathe in through your mouth without inhaling into your lungs, and then exhale through your nose, which I just want to pause for a second because I have to think about how to do that. And I don't think it's super easy, nor do I think a young person who maybe has vaped before or is familiar with vapes would necessarily go into the instructions looking for how to use it. Probably some of them are likely to just use it like a vape. But then this gets more complicated because as of April, the instructions have changed to say, press lips to the end opposite of jewel, breathe in through your mouth, full stop. This product is not intended for anyone under the age of 18. So it begs the question, did the product change, or is it important not to inhale it into your lungs? And if it was, why is it not now? Or why are you not telling people that? Why is it not up front? And if it's not intended for anyone under 18, all you have to do is scroll through the reviews right on Urban Outfitters to see people who self-identify in the 13 to 17 age category. This person throat started to itch and their nose was runny and their stomach started hurting. The next person got suspended, but still thinks it's a good product. Further down, it burned my throat. Or this person who had never had any kind of pen before, so they really liked this one to start with. It was not too aggressive and it had a great flavor. This is another sort of side issue, but just I think points to lack of regulation and oversight on these. Again, it's in the love FAQs. Can I recharge and refill it? No, you can't. But simply dispose of the device in the recycle bin. That's false. Any e-cigarette has a lithium-ion battery and they're electronic waste. They can't be just put in the trash or the recycle bin. They're a fire hazard. So it depends on local sanitation guidelines, what you should do with these as waste. PAVE actually did a campaign on the environmental impact of e-cigarettes called Vapes Are Trash. So if you want to learn more about that, vapesaretrash.org. But just to mention, simply dispose of the device in your recycle bin. It's not okay. So just to recap, the main reason we're concerned about these are known health risks of vaping at all, and the unknown risks due to ingredients that we know and ingredients that we don't know in these devices, and the lack of research, long-term research on aerosolizing and inhaling them, and what other compounds are formed and what damage they might be doing. Obviously, the youthful marketing, the wellness and health marketing, accessibility to youth, the fact that this is normalizing vaping. There's no real reason to vape your vitamins, your caffeine, or your melatonin. If you need those things, there are other ways to ingest them that are safer. This could be a potential on-ramp, as you saw the person in the Urban Outfitters reviews who this was their first thing. They thought it was not aggressive and easy. And you'll see a lot of messaging if you look at their social media, like, you shouldn't vape, nicotine is trash, nicotine's horrible, switch to these, like, it's good for you. And so it just takes that healthier alternative messaging a step further to say that these are good for you. And obviously the lack of regulation overall is what we're really concerned with, because you don't have the purchase age, the ingredient regulations, the labeling requirements, the laws around marketing and sale of these devices. So I just want to let you know, this is not, as I said, PAVE's main focus or even our top advocacy issue right now. We really are focused on flavored nicotine e-cigarettes, and we have a great campaign asking the FDA right now to deny all flavored e-cigarette products. So if you go to our website, that's the first thing you'll see, and we hope you'll join us in that. But we do also happen to have a letter ready that we have sent to Urban Outfitters CEO and other C-suite executives, asking them to stop selling these products. Because they are a very youth-friendly platform. There's no age verification, and we're worried about what this means for kids. So if you would like to send a letter yourself, you can use this QR code to access it. I can also drop the link in the chat. And if you want to join PAVE, as I said, we really are a network of volunteers across the country. We would love to partner with you, lend parent voices to advocacy issues locally. We can empower parents to do education to other adults in your community. We have great educational resources, a digital toolkit. We make everything work in a virtual world. So please get in touch with us. Let us know if you want to volunteer. And I just want to throw up our social media and our podcast, Big Tobacco Mess with the Wrong Moms. And then again, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm Christina at parentsaganstvaping.org.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patty Zettler. I am an associate professor at The Ohio State University Moritz College of Law and a member of Ohio State's Drug Enforcement and Policy Center and the Cancer Control Program at the James Comprehensive Cancer Center. So I want to thank Christina for that useful presentation on non-nicotine e-cigarettes and their marketing and potential health effects, and also thank all of you for being here to join us for this important discussion today. Consistent with my law background, what I'd like to add to our discussion are some thoughts on what the federal legal landscape, and in particular, what FDA authority looks like for the non-nicotine e-cigarettes that Christina has been discussing. So I'll talk about first, why these products are likely not tobacco products or dietary supplements under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, Next, I'll talk about why these products are likely drugs, or more specifically, drug delivery devices under federal law. And finally, I'll talk about some regulatory options for FDA, given that these products are likely drugs. Before I get into the substance, a disclaimer, which is that although I am a lawyer, I am not your lawyer, which is just to say, oops, I clicked past the disclaimer, which is just to say that what I'm saying today is for informational and educational purposes only and is not legal advice. So let's turn to the substance. So what are non-nicotine e-cigarettes? And as an aside, I'm using some of the images from Christina's slides with her permission to help make our examples more cohesive. So as Christina's presentation laid out, we're talking about e-cigarettes that are marketed as not containing nicotine. Instead, they might contain vitamins, essential oils, flavors, or other chemicals, as Christina explained. Some companies go further than just marketing as not containing nicotine and say, not only does the product not contain nicotine, it doesn't contain any tobacco at all. And that is the key to why these products are likely not going to be tobacco products subject to FDA's tobacco regulatory regime. FDA's statute defines tobacco products as things made or derived from tobacco. So assuming it is true that a product does not contain any ingredients made or derived from tobacco, they are almost certainly not tobacco products under the law. And before I go further, another caveat, which is I just want to be clear that what a product is under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, FDA statute, is a case-by-case product-specific analysis. So I'm not attempting here to make any claims about what any specific company's product is. I'm just trying to provide some examples and kind of a general way of thinking about how to understand what different products are. All right, so you might think, well, these products are not tobacco products, maybe, but surely they must be dietary supplements, right? Just because something is not a tobacco product does not mean FDA does not have jurisdiction over it. And many of these products are marketed as containing things that we probably intuitively think of as dietary supplements, like vitamin B or melatonin. And some companies likely would want to position their products as dietary supplements because, unlike for new tobacco products or new drugs, FDA pre-market authorization is generally not required for dietary supplements, and the regulatory regime for dietary supplements is generally pretty lax. And indeed, as you can see on this slide here, some companies do seem to be labeling their products as dietary supplements, putting sort of supplement facts on the box. But there are a number of reasons why these products also may not be dietary supplements as defined in federal law. And I want to highlight a couple. First and foremost, if we're talking about vaping products, to meet the definition of a dietary supplement, a product must be intended for ingestion. And a product intended to be inhaled, like an e-cigarette, simply cannot meet that definition. In other contexts, FDA has sent warning letters for products marketed as dietary supplements, but that were products that were inhaled, making exactly this point. So for example, in 2012, FDA sent a warning letter to a company called Breathable Foods that was marketing inhalable caffeine. And in that letter, FDA explained that products intended for inhalation cannot be dietary supplements, and that the product's labeling was misleading for suggesting that a product could be both inhaled and ingested, because in FDA's words, the functioning of the epiglottis in the throat keeps the processes of inhalation and ingestion mutually exclusive. So things that are intended to be inhaled just cannot meet the definition of a dietary supplement in federal law. Another thing to keep an eye on, especially as this market continues to expand, is that in general, products marketed with disease claims, so claims to treat or prevent disease, are regulated as drugs, not as dietary supplements. So you can see this is the piece of FDA's regulations that talk about how things marketed with disease claims are generally regulated as drugs. So to the extent companies position their non-nicotine e-cigarettes as smoking cessation products, for example, these products may also fall outside the dietary supplement definition for that reason, because they're marketed with intent that they be used to treat or prevent disease. So these products may not be tobacco products and may not be dietary supplements, but again, that is not the end of the inquiry into FDA's jurisdiction. These products could be drugs, or more accurately, drug delivery devices, but I'm going to focus on the drug definition for a couple of reasons, including simplicity. What falls within the definition of a drug in the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, as you can see on this slide, turns on the product's intended use. And intended use generally refers to the objective intent of the entity responsible for a product's labeling. So generally, that's the company manufacturing or selling a product. And as you can see here, a drug is something intended to diagnose, treat, or prevent disease, or to affect the structure or function of the body. And because of that structure function piece, the statutory definition of a drug is quite broad. Drugs include disease treatments, things we typically think of as drugs, like cancer therapies. But drugs also include things that we may not intuitively categorize as drugs, like antiperspirants, which are intended to alter the sweat function of the body, or even adult use drugs like non-medical or recreational cannabis. So although the definition of a drug is quite broad, courts have limited FDA's discretion to apply that definition to tobacco products. In short, the Supreme Court and the DC Circuit have said that FDA cannot regulate customarily marketed tobacco products as drugs or devices. But importantly, this limitation does not apply to the products we're talking about because they're not tobacco products, right? So the inquiry for determining whether a non-nicotine e-cigarette that doesn't contain any tobacco or isn't derived from tobacco is a drug. So the inquiry for determining whether a product like that is a drug is the same as for any other product, and is simply, is there evidence that companies intend the product to treat or prevent disease or to affect the structure or function of the body? And to answer that question, FDA can rely on any relevant source, that includes the three sort of sources of evidence of intended use listed on this slide. I'm going to focus on companies' representations or claims primarily because that's the source of evidence that FDA most commonly uses, and it's the least controversial. But that's not to say other sources are not important. For example, even absent any claims at all, a vaping product that contains melatonin, which is a well-known sleep or relaxation aid, is arguably intended to affect the structure or function of the body, and arguably would be a drug. But returning to representations, statements indicating either explicitly or implicitly that a non-nicotine vaping product is intended to treat or prevent disease would make it a drug. For example, as we already discussed, touting the smoking cessation benefits of such a product might make that product a drug, but even other more general statements like some products may be marketed with, like simply saying disease prevention, could count. But more common perhaps, and perhaps more difficult to simply remove from company promotional materials, may be structure function claims. Claims about focus, about boosting energy, about optimizing the brain and other organs, about supporting immunity, about stamina, even product names like calm are all potentially claims that demonstrate an intent for the product to affect the structure or function of the body. So optimizing the brain, for example, is pretty explicitly a claim about affecting a part of the body, the brain. And something like calm may implicitly suggest an intent to affect the nervous system or some other structure or function of the body. So again, with the caveat that I'm talking in generalities, and whether a particular product is a drug will be a case-specific analysis, the bottom line is that I think in many cases, FDA would be on strong legal ground to assert its jurisdiction over non-nicotine e-cigarettes as drugs or drug delivery devices. So if these products are often going to fall within FDA's drug regulatory authority, why are we seeing them on the market without FDA approval? Well, as you all know, just because FDA can regulate something does not mean that it will, or even that it should. And in this space, FDA has so far been pretty silent about these products. There's an FAQ on FDA's website that says, it's possible that a disposable closed system device that contains an e-liquid with truly zero nicotine would not be regulated as by FDA as a tobacco product. But the FAQ declines to say more than that or make clear that whether an e-cigarette is a tobacco product is not the end of the inquiry into FDA's jurisdiction. And there's been no barrage of warning letters to companies marketing these products or any other sort of public signaling for an appetite for enforcement. There may be some reasons for that lack of enforcement in this space, but there also may be good reasons to regulate here, as Christina's presentation explained. So what are the regulatory options? Well, Congress could always amend the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act in a variety of ways, right? But there is another regulatory option that does not require congressional action, and that would be for FDA to exert its existing drug authorities to regulate these products. And for those who are interested, FDA does have a web page for the public to report unlawful sales of products. So if you come across products that in your view are being unlawfully sold, that is an option for anyone to report. I do want to be clear that there are lots of criticisms and worthwhile criticisms of FDA's oversight of the tobacco and nicotine market in general. So by suggesting that FDA could exert its drug authorities here and should do that, I don't mean to suggest that FDA's tobacco products regulation is perfect. But FDA is the primary federal public health regulator in this space, and taking action against products falsely marketed as dietary supplements is something that FDA routinely does, and for good public health reasons, right? One is consumer protection, as Christina's presentation highlighted. There's lots of unknowns here about inhaling these substances, and there are some knowns about some of the risks, as some folks have put in the chat, and consumers may be at risk. And a second benefit we might think about is a benefit of encouraging the creation of knowledge and beneficial information. So we typically think of FDA's drug regulation authorities as kind of protecting us from unsafe and ineffective products, physically protecting us. But one key benefit to FDA drug regulation is that it requires companies to conduct research to understand what their products actually do. So if it's plausible that inhaling vitamins is a good thing, then let's actually get the research and understand what it is that inhaling vitamins does and why it's good or what the risks may be and so on. So again, in sum, although I think each product requires its own analysis, in general, I think there's good reason to think FDA could regulate this market under its drug authorities, and there are potentially good public health reasons for the agency to do so. So thanks for your time, and I look forward to your questions in the Q&A.
Thanks, Patty, for that overview of what is and isn't happening at the federal level. And one bright spot that I did want to mention is the recent amendments to the PACT Act, which prevents the mailing through the United States Postal Service of electronic cigarettes. So we saw that example from Christina's presentation of Love, talking about how they mail it in discrete boxes, and probably they are either violating the PACT Act or they are undermining the voluntary prohibitions that have been passed by all the other common carriers besides the United States Postal Service. So, and what it comes down to is something I'm going to talk about in my next slide, but talking about the definition that's included in the PACT Act, and it's a broad definition that clearly includes these products that we're talking about. So any electronic device that through an aerosolized solution delivers nicotine, flavor, or any other substance to the user inhaling from the device. And so that's obviously a broad definition that would include these e-cigarette devices that we're talking about, even though they don't contain nicotine. And so when we are talking about what in the absence of what the FDA is or isn't doing about these products, or what Congress is or isn't doing about these products, we can look to tribes and states and localities to try to address these products. And so most of this comes down to definitions and broad definitions being used to capture these products. And so there was a question in the chat about minimum legal sales age and whether it applies, and it really depends on the definition that the jurisdiction uses for e-cigarettes primarily. And so this is an example of a definition that for an e-cigarette that would not include these products. So electronic cigarettes mean a device or delivery system sold in combination with nicotine, which can be used to deliver to a person nicotine in an aerosolized or vaporized form. So that definition would not include these products. And then here's an example of the model definition that we usually suggest jurisdictions use, and that means that any device that may be used to deliver any aerosolized or vaporized substance to the person inhaling from the device, including but not limited to all those products, and it includes any substance that may be aerosolized or vaporized by such device, whether or not it contains nicotine. And so those are really important examples to show you the differences. And the definition for e-cigarettes comes up in a lot of different places. So for example, the one that I suggested not using from California is from their tax code. And the one that I gave you an example of that could be a good definition is one that we usually recommend for our minimum legal sales age policies. And so looking at these definitions and all the different ways that a policy might address e-cigarettes, whether it be smoke-free places, schools, being sure that these definitions are clearly captured or clearly capturing these products and not limited to tobacco or nicotine specifically. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on is that, you know, if you are from a jurisdiction and you somehow are in charge of enforcement, or you have the capacity to engage enforcement authorities, an option could be to sort of assess what's going on. So for example, we know that Monk is being sold at Urban Outfitters. There's no reason why, if you have an Urban Outfitters in your jurisdiction, that you couldn't send out enforcement agents to ensure that they are complying with your laws, especially, I mean, if your laws include the e-cigarette definition. So the first step is to check your definitions, update those definitions if you need to. And the second is to do some proactive enforcement, or during other enforcement, be checking these sorts of issues and making sure that these aren't being sold without licensing or however your law is established. So that's mainly all we have about this topic. So we have a good chunk of time for Q&A, and we had some already submitted in the Q&A. So if you have other questions and you'd like to put them in the Q&A, I think that Kira is going to start with facilitating the Q&A. And here's all of our contact information, which will be on the slides that you can get later.
Great, thank you so much, Natalie. So the sort of more, I'll start with the most recent one, but one of the questions has to do with the PACT Act and whether or not, you know, Natalie, if there's any news on when the US Postal Service will be enforcing the PACT Act requirements, preventing it from mailing e-cigarettes.
I don't have any updates on that. I don't know if you know anything, Kira.
I don't. I mean, yeah, I think we can probably follow up with you on that.
Yeah.
And there is a question about compatibility of certain pods with certain devices. I'm wondering if one of you wants to talk about why that matters. Like why does it matter perhaps that a certain, you know, non-nicotine pod is compatible with a product that is intended to be used with a nicotine cartridge?
Do you mean from a legal and regulatory standpoint, or?
I do.
Well, I can take a stab. So as I mentioned, you know, briefly, right, FDA has a statement on its website that, you know, sort of says it's possible zero nicotine, truly zero nicotine products that are closed system would not be regulated as tobacco products. And so, you know, I think the reason there's that kind of softness in the language is that, you know, if it's not a closed system and can be modified in ways that might make it a tobacco product, then it may be possible to regulate things as tobacco products. I'd have to think more about whether if you could put, putting I think the question's about love pods, putting a love pod in a Juul device would trigger a tobacco product, would sort of meet the tobacco product definition, but I think that's right, an accessory I see in the chat. Yeah. And so, I think that's why that's important from a regulatory perspective. I'd defer to Christina on the sort of public health question.
Yeah, I think just in terms of accessibility, if a young person doesn't have to buy a new device in order to use both of these, that just makes it easier, and younger people tend to be more cost sensitive, right? So that probably impacts how much they're using or whether or not they're using.
I think too, Patty, what you were saying, and I agree with it, is that if the device is intended that you could use Juul with it, which it kind of seems from the marketing, the device itself might be a tobacco product in that sense, but maybe the love pods are not, the ones that don't contain tobacco or nicotine still might not be a component part accessory. That might need some more thinking to think about, but at least the device part of it in a non-closed system, there doesn't seem a reason to think that couldn't be considered a tobacco product.
Although I think the question was about love pods being compatible with Juul devices. It's not clear to me from the question whether Juul pods are compatible with love devices, but I agree with what you said.
Yeah, I don't want to misstate because I don't know for certain. I would guess if it's the same size and shape and can be used with one, it could be used in the reverse way, but I don't know for sure.
And that might also speak to some of the problematic aspects of this is, if it looks like it might be compatible, there are people who are going to try to figure it out, and that could be could be dangerous for a number of reasons. Let's see. Are the products that you're talking about advertised as flavored?
I think it depends on the product, right? Some of them have flavor or variety like sexy or sleep or zen or love or whatever they are. So it's not a distinctive flavor, but then they'll list like the essential oils that are in them. But some of them, which are like sleepy, will say that they have lavender, and they talk about aromatics and how good they smell. So I think there's at least the implication of flavor if they're not like, this is berry B vitamins, yeah.
And I think that speaks to the importance of having really comprehensive definitions of flavored products too, because depending on how you define what a flavor is, I mean, it could be, something that imparts a smell that other than that of tobacco. So someone did ask, what is the thinking on amending the definition of tobacco under the Tobacco Control Act so that it does encompass synthetic nicotine?
Yeah, so I was just going to type an answer, but there was a bill in the House in 2019 that would have addressed synthetic nicotine that talked about alternative nicotine. As I read the bill, what it would have done is not actually expand the tobacco product definition to cover synthetic nicotine, but would have basically directed FDA to take action on non-tobacco or sort of tobacco-free synthetic nicotine products, which would, without expanding the tobacco product definition, and the statute wouldn't enable FDA necessarily to bring those products into its tobacco regulatory regime. So there definitely is interest. There's been some movement on the Hill. There's definitely interest in addressing this, but that bill would not have included a definition as expansive as the one that Natalie showed. That's the model definition from the Public Health Law Center.
And then I think this is probably a question that's on a lot of people's minds when they hear about these products, but are they truly zero nicotine? Is there still nicotine in them, even though, of course, they're being marketed and advertised as being free of nicotine?
I think, I did this presentation making the assumption that like, even if they are zero nicotine, there are still all of these things that we need to be concerned about. So approached out with that assumption, but I think it comes along with all these other regulatory issues and a lack of transparency that we don't know for sure. And that, it's not necessarily, I'm not going to trust these companies to be telling me exactly what's in them. So who knows? And I just want to say, going back to the question about flavors, there are definitely some that are like, this is the berry flavor. So many of them, do have definite distinct flavors that they're sold in.
Let's see. Why not just push CEDAR to regulate them as drugs? That creates a high bar for approval.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, I think FDA generally probably has the authority to do that right now. And I do agree it has a high bar for approval. And, leaving aside sort of the tobacco products context, I think that would be consistent with how FDA treats other products that are illegally sold unapproved drugs, but are sort of marketed as dietary supplements. It's, FDA routinely sends warning letters to companies marketing those products, routinely takes action against those kinds of products. So, I think there's, perhaps there could be some efforts from public health law organizations on that front. But I wouldn't be opposed to that personally, but I don't know what other panelists think.
I think the last time I talked about this, I kind of talked about this as the wild, wild west of the wild, wild west. Like the FDA hasn't even issued any marketing orders for e-cigarettes that have nicotine in them that are derived from tobacco. And so we're like, the FDA is very far behind the ball on this. And then on top of that, we have, the emergence of synthetic nicotine, and then we have these two. And so like, this is like, it seems like it's probably lower on the importance side for FDA, which doesn't mean it's not important and it's not causing harm. It just means that it's not that surprising to see that this isn't getting a lot of like elevated concern when we don't even have comprehensive regulation of e-cigarettes that contain nicotine or that contain synthetic nicotine.
And I will say, I guess to contradict a little bit what I said before, I do think there is a little bit of maybe legal risk for FDA in going after these products at this moment, in the sense that, as Natalie said, there hasn't even been comprehensive regulation of what folks might think are maybe the more concerning vaping products on the market that contain nicotine, either tobacco derived or synthetic. And so if FDA were to be challenged, it might look not great to be going after these, but not the nicotine containing products. That said, I do think, FDA clearly has taken action against inhalable caffeine products in the past, for example, and treating these products similarly to those other inhalable caffeine products. Someone mentioned products that contain caffeine in the chat. I think that would be consistent with how FDA has treated similar products in the past.
And to follow up on that, Patty, this is actually a question that was in the chat, but it was also a question that I had. Do you know what the follow-up is generally on the kind of non-tobacco drug device side after a warning letter is sent? Is there any additional action taken?
It depends. When FDA sends warning letters, sometimes there are closeout letters that explain kind of what happened, and those are typically posted to FDA's website. I don't know how often those are posted for these kind of these kinds of unlawfully marketed products versus, Pfizer's marketing its drug in a way that violates FDA's advertising and promotion regulations. And there's a back and forth, and there's sort of a closeout to the enforcement action or something like that. So sometimes there are repeated warning letters, sometimes there are closeout letters, sometimes eventually there are, court actions, but warning letters are the, I think, primary tool that FDA uses in this space.
But in theory, they have authority to issue like civil monetary penalties and hypothetically seize products. That just generally doesn't happen. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'd have to look at, FDA typically posts its enforcement statistics on its website, although maybe it hasn't done it for several years. But I mean, warning letters are far and away the sort of largest enforcement tool that FDA uses, or most frequent rather.
I do see some questions about synthetic nicotine. I do just want to point out again that we're going to have a separate webinar on synthetic nicotine products. So please stay tuned for Public Health Law Center communication on that. And I think we're kind of coming up on the end. So thank you all so much for presenting. Really helpful, awesome information. Natalie put our contact info at the end there, and then our slides will be available probably within about 24 hours along with the recording. And please follow up with us if you have any further questions. So thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.